A corner of the phone screen was shattered. The crack spread from the bottom left, like a dried-up riverbed, reflecting tiny shards of light in the sunlight. I stared at the crack for 2 seconds, my thumb unconsciously rubbing against its edge. This was my umpteenth time making this motion, as if I could smooth the fracture away. Vera, you're still using a phone this broken? Claudia's voice came from the right, sweet, with just the right amount of surprise. She had just gotten out of the car, holding 2 paper bags with a logo I'd only dared to glance at from outside a store window in my past life. I just got a new one, so I'll give you this iPhone 15. She was already reaching into her bag to search for it. I don't need it anyway. Her tone was as light as if she were talking about the weather. I remembered this tone. In my past life, when I heard those words, my eyes welled up, and I felt I had made the best friend in the world. Willing to give me a phone she didn't need, wasn't that an immense kindness? I took it from her. I used that phone for 2 years, until the screen completely gave out. As for what Claudia said behind my back, I only heard about it later. Vera? What's wrong? I snapped back to reality. Claudia was looking at me, head tilted, her mascara perfectly applied. There was something hidden in her eyes, something I could now see clearly. It wasn't concern. It was scrutiny. Like she was checking if the fish had taken the bait. I shoved my hands into my pockets, my fingers brushing against the cracked edge of the phone. No need. Claudia blinked, her smile unchanged, but her rhythm faltered for a beat. Huh? Didn't you say your phone was broken? It is broken. I shoved my phone deeper into my pocket. But I'm used to using my own things. I turned and walked toward the school gate, my pace neither fast nor slow. Behind me, there was silence for about 2 seconds, then came the sound of Claudia's footsteps catching up, the crisp clatter of high heels against the pavement. Vera, what's wrong with you today? Are you feeling unwell? She walked up beside me, tilting her head to study my expression. You don't look so good. What an act. In my mind, I paired that line with a scene. On this day in my past life, Claudia was walking to my right just like this, tilting her head to look at me, even the angle of her tilt was the same. The difference was that in my past life, I took that phone, and in this life, I didn't. It's nothing. I just didn't sleep well last night, I said. That was the truth. But what I didn't say was that I didn't sleep well not because of insomnia, but because when those memories came flooding back last night, I hid under the covers and trembled for a full half-hour. Not out of fear, but out of anger. That anger was so thick, so dense, that I wanted to rush out, knock on Claudia's dormitory door, and settle every single score from my past life with her. But I held back. Because anger couldn't help me. I had already been angry in my past life. On the night my grandmother was kicked out of the hospital, I crouched by the roadside, crying until I dry-heaved, hating everyone. Hating Claudia, hating those who wouldn't lend me money, hating myself for being poor. Anger was useless. Only one thing was useful. Prepare in advance. I opened my phone's calendar. October 17, 2024. 23 days until Grandma breaks her leg. 45 days until the mistress incident erupts. 89 days until the day I get hit by a car and die. I closed the calendar and walked into the teaching building. Sunlight streamed through the windows in the hallway, cutting neat blocks of light across the floor tiles. I stepped over those blocks of light, my mind already mapping out every step ahead. But plans like this never go exactly the way you imagine. When I got back to the dorm, the room was empty. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the WeChat chat with my grandma. In my past life, she broke her leg because the hallway light was broken. She missed a step going down the stairs in the dark. I remembered it too clearly enough to recall the smell of disinfectant in the hospital corridor and the first words she said lying in the hospital bed, Vera, it doesn't hurt, don't cry. I typed, Grandma, please be careful going up and down the stairs. If the hallway light breaks, call me, and I'll find someone to fix it. After sending it, I felt it wasn't enough. I thought for a moment and added another line, I've been seeing news lately about accidents in old neighborhood hallways because of broken lights. I'm worried about you. Grandma was probably busy and didn't reply right away. I opened the banking app and checked my balance, 2,300 yuan. This is everything I have. In my past life, when Grandma broke her leg, the surgery and subsequent rehabilitation cost nearly 50,000. Back then, I scraped together over 20,000 by borrowing from here and there, and relied on student loans and part-time jobs to slowly pay off the rest. But in this life, I have one advantage: I know exactly which day it will happen. 23 days. I need to scrape together 50,000 in 23 days. Not try my best, but must. I leaned against the headboard and started thinking of ways to make money. Substituting for classes, ghostwriting, running errands, I had done all of these in my past life, and the hourly pay was pitifully low. I needed a channel that brought in money fast, one I hadn't tried in my past life. My phone buzzed. Grandma replied, "Got it, got it. Focus on your studies, don't worry about me." I stared at this reply, suddenly remembering something. In my past life, I had called Grandma to remind her, but she agreed verbally without actually doing anything. The hallway light was still broken, and the non-slip mat hadn't been bought. It wasn't that Grandma didn't care, she just thought it wasn't that serious. Talking without action is useless. I had to do it for Grandma. I transferred $500 to Mrs. Patterson next door with a note: "Mrs. Patterson, could you please buy a non-slip mat for my grandma's staircase and have someone check the hallway light bulb? Replace it if it's broken. Keep the rest for tea on me." Mrs. Patterson replied instantly, "Got it, don't worry." I breathed a sigh of relief. But it didn't last long, my phone buzzed again. It wasn't Grandma. It was Claudia. "Vera, save me a seat tomorrow morning, okay? I've got some stuff to take care of outside." A bunny ear emoji followed, pink. I stared at the message, suddenly feeling a bit dazed. On this same day in my past life, Claudia had sent this exact message. Back then, I replied with okay, then got up at 6 the next morning and sat in the classroom for 3 hours waiting for Claudia to show up. She didn't arrive until 9:30, and she didn't even use the seat, she just didn't want anyone else to sit there. Back then, I thought that was what friends did for each other. Now, I just felt stupid. I typed 2 words, "Sure thing." Claudia sent a happy emoji. I typed another line, 200 each time. The other side went silent for about 10 seconds. Then Claudia sent 3 question marks. "What kind of relationship do we have, and you're talking to me about money?" A voice message, the tone laced with laughter, but beneath the laughter lay a thin layer of ice. I didn't reply. I waited. After about another minute, Claudia sent a second voice message, her tone now soft and cautious. "Vera, are you in some kind of trouble? If anything's wrong, just tell me. There's no need to be polite between us." In my previous life, every time before Claudia borrowed money, she used this exact tone. First, "We're like family," then, "Are you in trouble?" and finally, "I'm in a tough spot too, but I'll try my best to help you." 3 steps, like a well-rehearsed script. I typed a few words, "No trouble, just broke." I tossed my phone onto the bed and closed my eyes. I waited for Claudia's next move. In my previous life, I knew Claudia all too well. The thing she feared most wasn't losing a friend, but losing a sense of control. When I stopped playing along, Claudia would first test the waters, then apply pressure, and finally, if that didn't work, she would find another path. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, Claudia sent a red envelope, 200 yuan. The note read, "Seat reservation fee, hee." I accepted the red envelope. Screenshot. Archived. I opened my memo app and created a new folder called Record. It already had its first entry, October 17, 2024, Claudia transferred 200 yuan, note, seat reservation fee, hee, with a screenshot attached. I had this folder in my past life too. But that was after my grandmother became paralyzed, after I was falsely accused of being a mistress. Only when I was utterly desperate did I think to gather evidence. Too late. This time, I'd start from the very beginning. The next morning at 6:40, I arrived at the classroom. Not to save a seat for Claudia, her 200 only covered yesterday's service. To reserve a seat today, she'd need to place a new order. And Claudia hadn't sent a single message since. I took the middle seat in the front row, set down my backpack, and pulled out my phone to check messages. Breyer had posted a moment on her social feed 20 minutes ago, a photo of a suitcase, captioned, "So annoying, school's starting." I stared at it for 2 seconds, then suddenly remembered something. In my past life, Breyer was my roommate, the only daughter of the city's wealthiest family, the Gus, and she slept in the bunk above mine. But we barely spoke. Claudia had said she was eccentric and hard to get along with, and I believed it, deliberately keeping my distance. Later, I found out she wasn't eccentric, she was just completely helpless in daily life. In my past life, she had hired 3 maids, one to do her hair, one to pick out her clothes, and one to run errands. I exited the social feed and opened my chat with Briar. Blank. After we added each other as friends in my past life, not a single message had been exchanged. I thought for a moment, then typed, "Going back to school today?" After sending it, I felt it was a bit abrupt. But she replied instantly, "Yeah, on the way." "What time will you arrive?" "I'll come pick you up." She paused for a moment, "Do you know me?" I almost laughed out loud. That was so Briar, not a challenge, just pure confusion. "No. But aren't you my roommate?" "Oh, right." She paused again, then sent a voice message, her voice sounding lazy. "You don't need to pick me up, I have a driver. But can you do me a favor? Do I have to make my own bed in the dorm?" "I'll do it for you." 500. There was silence on the other end for 2 seconds, then she said crisply, "Deal." At 10 in the morning, Briar arrived. She dragged a silver suitcase into the dorm, the logo on it unfamiliar to me, but the craftsmanship was too refined to be mass-produced. She set the case down on the floor, stood still, and stared at the bare bed frame with an expression as serious as if she were solving a complex math problem. "What's wrong?" I stood up from my chair. "How do you put the sheets on?" She pointed to the bag of brand new bedding beside the bed frame, her tone flat, but I could hear the honest admission of "I really don't know how." I walked over, tore open the bag, and in 3 minutes had the sheet on the bed, 2 minutes to put the duvet cover on, and 1 minute to fold the quilt. Briar stood by the whole time, watching, and when I finished, she said, "Can you teach me?" I glanced at her. "Why do you need to learn that? Don't you have a maid?" Briar was silent for a second. Just 1 second, but I noticed a flicker of something in her expression, not offense, but a faint, almost painful thing. "They're not here, but I still have to live," she said, her tone still lazy, but the words themselves weren't. I didn't press further. I sat back down, opened my phone's notes app, and added Briar's name to the clients list. But what I didn't expect was for Briar to speak up on her own, "Your nails look nice." I looked down at my own hands. I do enjoy doing my nails, and I'm pretty good at it. In my past life, I did them a few times for classmates in the dorm, never charging because I felt too awkward to ask. "I can do it for you," I said. 600 per session. Briar thought for a moment. "How about 800? I want rhinestones on it." I looked at her expression, confirmed she was serious, and nodded. "Deal." That night, I did Briar's nails in the dorm. Pink gradient, with crushed rhinestones. Briar barely spoke the whole time, but she kept watching my hands, not the nails, but the movements. As I applied the polish, she suddenly said, "Your hands are steady." I looked up, and Briar was already looking down at her phone, her expression unchanged. After finishing, she held it up to the light for a long time, then transferred 800 yuan. I glanced at my balance, 3,100. But I didn't stay happy for long. Because that night at 11 o'clock, I received a text from an unfamiliar number. "Vera? Heard you're taking gigs? How much for ghostwriting homework?" The sender didn't sign their name, but I glanced at the area code, it was a local number, ending in 520. I stared at the number for a few seconds, then opened a search engine and typed it in. No real name information. But I found a linked account, on some second-hand trading platform, username "CC doesn't stay up late." The profile picture was a cup of milk tea. Claudia's usual profile picture. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Claudia was testing me. She used a burner account to ask about my ghostwriting rates, not to hire me, but to find out what I was up to. In my past life, Claudia had pulled something similar, pretending to be a stranger, adding me on WeChat, coaxing information out of me, then screenshotting the conversation and sending it to others with the caption, "Is this guy completely obsessed with money or what?" I didn't reply to that message. I saved the number to my contacts, labeled it Claudia Burner, and turned off my phone. A breeze rustled through the plane trees outside the window, leaves whispering in the night. The late October air had already turned chilly. I wrapped my jacket tighter, opened my notes app, and typed today's date along with a line, "She's collecting information about me." My plan was simple, earn 50,000 in 23 days while gathering evidence against Claudia. But there was one thing I overlooked, my body still carried the memory of my past life. Not memory. Instinct. The next afternoon, while I was in line at the cafeteria, someone tapped me on the shoulder from behind. I spun around, my heart instantly racing to 120, as if someone had shoved me from the back. I saw a stranger's face. "Hey, you dropped your meal card," the person said, bending down to pick it up and handing it to me. I took it, said thanks, and after turning around, I realized my hands were trembling. I clenched my fists, took a deep breath, and silently scolded myself, pathetic. This wasn't the first time. In the 3 days since I'd been reborn, I'd been startled several times. Footsteps too close in the hallway made me tense up, someone suddenly appearing at the edge of my vision made me instinctively step back, and last night I even woke up with a jolt just because my roommate turned over in bed, taking half a minute to remember where I was. In the final days of my past life, I was followed. I didn't know who it was, maybe someone Claudia hired, maybe strangers from the internet who cursed me out. I developed a habit, constantly looking back while walking, and never daring to turn off the lights when I slept. These habits didn't disappear just because I was reborn. They're embedded in my nerves, like old wounds that ache when the sky turns overcast. I carried my tray to a corner, sat down, and ate with my head lowered. Halfway through my meal, someone sat down across from me. "Vera?" I looked up. It was a guy, glasses, plaid shirt, average-looking but neat. I recognized him, Ethan. Claudia's suitor. In my past life, this guy chased Claudia for 2 years, spent 40 or 50,000, and ended up dumped and called not good enough for her. "You are?" I pretended not to recognize him. "I'm a friend of Claudia's, Ethan." He smiled, a little shy. "Claudia said you've been feeling down lately, so she asked me to come check on you." My hand paused mid-reach for the food. "Claudia sent Ethan to check on me?" I set down my chopsticks and studied Ethan's expression. His smile was genuine, and so was the look in his eyes. He truly believed he was doing something good, looking out for a friend on behalf of another friend. "I'm doing just fine," I said. "Thanks." Ethan nodded, but he didn't leave. He sat across from me, hesitating a few times as if he wanted to say something, and finally blurted out, "Is there some kind of misunderstanding between you and Claudia?" I looked at him, and a question suddenly occurred to me. In my past life, did Ethan know about the things Claudia had done? Later, when Claudia was taken to court, did Ethan finally see her for who she really was? I thought for a moment, then said something ambiguous. "What do you think of Claudia as a person?" Ethan paused for a second, then smiled. "She's pretty good, you know. Warm-hearted, and she treats her friends well." Warm-hearted. Treats her friends well. I lowered my head, took a bite of rice, and didn't respond. I was thinking about one thing. In my past life, had I seen Claudia the same way? The following week, my life became very busy. I was juggling 3 things at once, making money, gathering evidence, and taking care of Grandma. Making money was the smoothest part. Briar became my first steady client, and she was ridiculously generous. Saving seats, waking people up, buying breakfast, 600 a day, picking out clothes and doing makeup, 300 an hour, manicures and massages, 800 per session. On top of that, with odd jobs like covering classes for others, writing book reports, and trimming bangs, I earned over 7,000 in a week. But what really caught my attention wasn't the money, it was Briar. That night, I was helping Briar organize her wardrobe. She had an absurd amount of clothes, but they were all crammed together, making it impossible to find anything when she needed it. I reorganized everything by color and style, and it took me nearly the whole night. Briar sat on the bed watching me, then suddenly said, "You seem really good at this kind of thing." "What kind of thing?" "Organizing. Sorting." Briar thought for a moment, as if searching for the right word. "You remember where every piece of clothing goes, don't you?" I was taken aback for a second. I did remember. Not just clothes, I remembered the exact spot of every item in the dorm, the seating arrangement in the classroom and who sat where, even the order of products on the shelves at the school convenience store. This wasn't some superpower, it was a habit I developed in my past life. When life backs you into a corner, you start paying attention to every detail, because details might be all you have left. "Sort of," I said. Briar let out an "oh," and then said something I didn't expect. can you help me organize my bags too? I can't remember which ones I have. I glanced at her. You don't remember which bags you own? Too many. Briar's tone was flat, not showing off, just stating a fact. I took the job, quoted 500, but Briar gave me 800. As I was packing up, though, I noticed something. All of Briar's bags were in the closet, not one of them had ever been carried out. Brand new, still in their dust bags, like exhibits in a museum. I didn't ask why. But I tucked that detail away in the back of my mind. Meanwhile, Claudia's behavior was more unsettling than I'd expected. These past few days, she'd been unusually quiet, no longer asking me for money, no longer ordering me around, barely even saying a word. At first, I thought she was just sulking after I refused to buy her that phone. But I soon realized something was off. Every time I posted something on my moments, she'd give it a like within minutes. And not all of them, just a carefully selected few, the ones about making money, the ones about Briar. This kind of silence was far scarier than any shouting. Once, I posted a photo of Briar and me at the mall, captioned Girls Shopping Day. Claudia liked it instantly. 3 minutes later, a WeChat message came through. Vera, are you close with Briar? The tone was casual, as if it were just a random question. Not bad. Her family's pretty rich, right? Seems like it. Can you ask her for me if she needs any help? I'd like to earn some extra cash too. I stared at this message, recalling my past life. In my past life, Claudia used this exact tactic to get close to Briar, first making me the middleman, then slowly taking everything from me. Briar's trust, everyone else's goodwill, even my job opportunities were snatched away. In the end, Claudia became Briar's bestie, while I, Vera, was reduced to the poor thing trying to climb the social ladder. I typed back, why don't you ask her yourself? You two are close, so put in a good word for me. I didn't reply. About 10 minutes later, Claudia sent a long voice message, her voice trembling with tears. Vera, I know I was wrong before. I'll pay you back the money I owe you. Just forgive me this once, okay? I really need this job. After listening, I forwarded the voice message to my notes for safekeeping, then replied with one sentence, then pay me back first. Claudia fell silent. I closed the chat window and sent Briar a WeChat message. If anyone asks you about me, don't reply to them. Briar replied instantly, who? A friend. Got it. Briar paused, then added another message, need me to help you shut her down? I can hire someone to do it, professional grade. I couldn't help but laugh. No need, I'll handle it myself. Alright then. Briar sent another transfer, $1,000, with a note emotional damages. I pocketed the money and leaned back in my chair, suddenly feeling a bit absurd. The most reliable source of income one had right now was actually because of Claudia's behind-the-scenes scheming. Every time she did something disgusting, Briar would transfer me a mental distress compensation. The logic was too strange, but I wasn't about to correct it. I wrote in my notes, Claudia is starting to get close to Briar, intentions obvious. Evidence saved. Then I closed my phone and shut my eyes. I made a decision today, go back to my hometown tomorrow to visit Grandma. There were 16 days left until Grandma broke her leg. I would personally check the hallway lights, personally lay down the non-slip mats, and personally tell Grandma, don't go downstairs for a while. I thought that would be enough. But what I didn't know was that some things can't be avoided just by preparing in advance. Because the reason Claudia hated me ran much deeper, and much earlier, than I had ever imagined. My hometown is on the outskirts of the city, an hour and a half away by bus. I arrived at 2 in the afternoon. Grandma was sunbathing in the yard, a newspaper spread across her lap, her reading glasses sliding down to the tip of her nose. She looked like she had dozed off while reading. I didn't wake her. I tiptoed into the stairwell and looked up at the light. The bulb was still there, but a layer of dust coated the socket, making it impossible to tell if it worked or not. I found a long stick and tapped the socket gently. The bulb flickered on, wavering twice before steadying. A bad connection. I frowned. In my past life, this light had completely burned out. Grandma had felt her way down the stairs in the dark and fallen. In this life, it hadn't failed yet, but it was close. I noted the model, went to the nearby hardware store to buy a new bulb, borrowed a ladder, and replaced it myself. As I changed the bulb, standing on the highest rung of the ladder, my hand barely reaching the socket, I had to stand on tiptoe. A sudden image flashed through my mind. On the night Grandma tumbled down the stairs in my past life, had she also walked on tiptoe past that dead light? Had she also hesitated about going downstairs? Vera? Grandma's voice came from the yard, hoarse with the remnants of sleep. I climbed down from the ladder, turned around, and saw Grandma standing at the yard gate, squinting at me. Why are you back? Don't you have class today? No class this afternoon. I walked over and showed Grandma the old light bulb in my hand. The bulb in the hallway needs replacing. I bought a new one and put it in. Grandma glanced at the bulb and frowned. Child, why waste the money? The bulb still works, doesn't it? It's about to break, I said. When you go downstairs at night from now on, make sure to watch your step. I know. Grandma waved her hand and turned to go inside. Have you eaten? I'll make you a bowl of noodles. I followed Grandma into the house. The kitchen smelled of lard and soy sauce, mingling with the scent of osmanthus flowers drifting in from outside. Grandma, her back hunched, busied herself at the stove, her movements a bit slower than in her past life. Back then, at this time, her body was still strong. It was only after she broke her leg that she aged rapidly. I leaned against the kitchen doorframe, watching Grandma's back, and suddenly my eyes stung. Grandma turned around, saw my expression, and paused. What's wrong? It's nothing. I rubbed my eyes. Just the chilly fumes. Grandma didn't believe me, but she didn't press further. She set 2 bowls of noodles on the table, sat down on one side while I took the other. We ate in silence. Autumn sunlight streamed through the window, spilling across the tabletop and settling on the 2 steaming bowls of noodles. A question suddenly struck me. In my previous life, when was the last time I had noodles with Grandma? I couldn't remember. That memory had been buried under the image of Grandma lying in a hospital bed, drowned out by the antiseptic smell of hospital corridors, and smothered by the sound of my own voice as I knelt on the floor, crying while begging for money over the phone. I lowered my head and ate all the noodles cleanly. Before leaving, I left 2,000 yuan in cash for Grandma, tucked under the coffee table. She chased after me to return it, but I ran fast and had already gotten on the bus. There weren't many people on the bus. I sat in the back row, by the window. Outside the window, rows of plane trees receded into the distance, their leaves beginning to turn yellow. I opened the notes app on my phone and glanced at my plan. 16 days until Grandma breaks her leg. I still need 24,000 for the surgery. The evidence on Claudia is still being gathered. Everything is going according to plan. But for some reason, there was a small, unsettled place in my heart. It felt like walking down a familiar road, yet sensing that the ground beneath my feet wasn't quite the same as in my memory. What I didn't know was that the lamp I had replaced would be loosened by someone 3 days later. And the person who loosened the bulb wasn't Claudia. It was the evening of the 18th day. I was doing nail art in the dorm. Briar sat across from me, her hands coated with base gel, drying under the lamp. The dorm was filled with the scent of gel polish, slightly sweet, a bit like the Play-Doh from childhood. Did you get things sorted out at your grandmother's place? Briar suddenly asked. I was taken aback. How did you know I went back? There was mud on your shoes when you came back that day. Briar's tone was flat, as if stating something trivial. That kind of red soil only exists in the suburbs. I glanced at her. This girl, who couldn't even make her own bed, had actually noticed the mud on my shoes. It's done, I said. Changed the light bulb, put down the non-slip mat. Briar nodded and didn't ask any more. About half a minute later, the dryer stopped. She pulled her hands out, held them up to the light, and suddenly said, Vera, have you ever thought that no matter how well you prepare for something, things can still go wrong? My movements paused. I looked at Briar's expression, trying to find the real meaning behind her words. But Briar had already looked down at her phone, her face back to that lazy, indifferent look. I didn't have time to dwell on it. Because my phone rang. It was Mrs. Patterson. Vera, your grandmother fell. My mind went blank. Not like the spinning dizziness from my past life, but a strange, quiet white noise. I could hear Mrs. Patterson speaking on the other end of the line, hear someone walking down the dormitory hallway, hear Briar asking me what's wrong. But I couldn't make a sound myself. It took me about 2 seconds to find my voice again. Is it serious? It's okay, it's okay. She fell from the second floor, just scraped her leg, no fractures. Your grandmother said she doesn't want to go to the hospital, asked me to call you first. I closed my eyes. No fracture. Just a bruise. I changed the light bulb, laid down the non-slip mat, and Grandma still fell. But it was just a bruise, not a fracture. No. Mrs. Patterson, was the light on? It was on. Your grandma said so herself, the light was on when she came down the stairs, she just missed her step. It was on. The light was on. I hung up the phone, sat on the edge of the bed, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Briar looked at me, said nothing, but didn't do anything else either, just sat there quietly, like a cat that doesn't care much about the world but happens to be crouching beside you. My mind was racing. The light was on. The non-slip mat was laid down. Grandma still missed her step. This wasn't a problem of insufficient prevention, this was a problem of deliberate sabotage. In my past life, Claudia had someone break the hallway light, causing Grandma to fracture a bone. In this life, I replaced the light in advance and laid down the mat, so Grandma only got a scrape. But Claudia had made her move, even with my precautions in place, she still acted. This made one thing clear, Claudia hadn't acted on a whim, she had planned this long ago. She did it in my past life, and she would do it again in this one. No matter how I tried to prevent it, if she wanted to harm Grandma, she would always find a way. I stood up and grabbed my coat. I'm going home. Now? Briar glanced out the window. It was already dark. I'll have the driver take you. No need. I'll have the driver take you. Briar repeated, his tone unchanged, but I caught the unspoken refusal to argue. I didn't push back. In the car, I watched the flowing lights outside the window, my mind stuck on one question: how did Claudia know my grandmother's address? In my past life, I was friends with her for 4 years and never once brought her home. I never mentioned my grandmother's specific address, nor did I post any location tags on social media. Unless, she had been digging into my information long before. I opened my phone and scrolled through Claudia's WeChat moments, flipping back one post at a time until I reached one from last winter, a 9-grid photo layout with the caption, "So happy today." In the background of the 7th photo, there was a street sign. The place name on that sign was only 2 blocks away from Grandma's house. I took a screenshot of the photo, zoomed in, and zoomed in again. The characters on the sign were blurry, but I could still make out their outlines. I took a deep breath and saved the screenshot into the records folder. By the time the car arrived at the hospital, it was already 9 in the evening. Grandma was sitting on the observation bed in the emergency room, her right calf wrapped in gauze, a scratch on her face, but her spirits were still good. Grandma. It's nothing, Grandma smiled as soon as she saw me, waving her hand. I just took a fall, just a scratch. Mrs. Patterson is making a big fuss over nothing. I walked over, crouched down, and took Grandma's hand. Her hand was rough, the knuckles prominent, the back of it covered in age spots. I buried my face in her palm and muttered, "I'm sorry." "What are you saying, child?" I didn't explain. I said to myself, this time it was just a scratch. Next time, I won't give her the chance. After we got back from the hospital, I did one thing. I set all the addresses, phone numbers, and chat records related to Grandma to private, and then installed a tracking app on her phone. It wasn't that I didn't trust Grandma, it was that I needed to make sure that the next time something happened, I would know about it first. At the same time, I began collecting evidence against Claudia more systematically. It wasn't just about bank transfer records and chat screenshots anymore, I needed to find the connection between her and the person who changed the light bulb. But the problem was, I didn't even know who that person was. In my past life, I only learned the truth moments before my death. Right before I died, I saw Claudia standing by the roadside, laughing, and everything clicked into place. But I had no idea who the perpetrator was, what the transfer records looked like, or what the chat logs contained. I only knew one thing, that person would strike again. Because Claudia wouldn't stop. And this judgment was confirmed on the 45th day. In my past life, the 45th day was when the mistress scandal erupted. Someone posted on a forum, claiming I had seduced a married man. The post included a photo of me with a male teacher. It was a group photo from last semester's student council event, maliciously cropped to cut out everyone else, leaving only me and that teacher. I opened Tiaba at 7 in the morning and saw the same post. The title was identical. The image was identical. But this time, there was one extra thing. A sentence had been added to the post: this student previously modified their own grades in the academic system. I've already taken screenshots of the relevant records. I stared at that sentence, my heart racing. This hadn't happened in my past life. There was only the accusation of being a mistress, not of grade tampering. This meant Claudia had upgraded her plan. She wanted to ruin my reputation morally while also destroying my academic standing. I didn't panic. I first took a screenshot of the post and saved it, then logged into the school's academic system. The login history showed someone had attempted to access my account 3 days ago from a certain subnet on the campus network. I never used to change my passwords, not in my past life, but this time I did. On the very first day I returned, I changed every single password and set up login verification. That login attempt had failed. But the post claimed, I've already taken screenshots of the relevant records, which meant Claudia didn't actually need to log into my account. She just needed to fake a screenshot. A single fake screenshot, spread across Tiaba, could destroy a person's reputation. Because most people wouldn't bother to verify, they'd just repost, comment, and hurl insults. I turned on my computer and began writing a clarification post. I didn't rush to publish it. First, I checked the original poster's IP address. Just like in my past life, it was using the campus network, and the login account belonged to Claudia. I took a screenshot of the IP query results, and then another screenshot of Claudia's campus network login records. Then I did one more thing. I contacted the technical teacher at the academic affairs office and requested to retrieve my own login records. Teacher, I suspect someone has been trying to log into my academic account to alter my grades. Please help me check the login records from the past month. The academic affairs office took this matter very seriously. An hour later, I received a login log. The log showed that over the past month, there was only one attempt to log into my account from a different location, which failed. The IP address was linked to Claudia's campus network account. I also took a screenshot of this log. Then I opened the school forum and posted a long thread. The title was, "The Truth About the Defamatory Post," attached screenshots of IP address, login records, and chat logs. The content was divided into 3 parts. First, I clarified that the photo was a group shot from a student event, with over 30 people present, and attached the original image. Second, I posted the IP address of the poster and the campus network login records, proving that the poster was Claudia. Third, I posted the login logs of the academic system to prove that the claim of grade tampering is a rumor. The last sentence, the above evidence has been submitted to the police and the school. Those who spread rumors will bear legal responsibility. 15 minutes after the post was published, the view count exceeded 2,000. At 20 minutes, the school's official account replied, "We have taken note of this matter and will handle it seriously." 30 minutes later, Claudia called. "Vera, have you lost your mind?" Her voice was trembling, not from fear, but from anger. "How could you post something like that?" I leaned back in my chair, my tone flat. "Am I not stating the facts? That wasn't me who posted it. My account was hacked." "Oh? Then how did you know the account I mentioned was yours?" "I don't recall mentioning your name, did I?" There was about 3 seconds of silence on the other end of the line. I smiled. "Claudia, you just exposed yourself." I heard it from someone else." "Then call the police. Let them investigate who hacked your account." "Vera." Claudia's voice changed. It was no longer that feigned gentleness, but a sharpness I had never heard before. "Do you have to do this? Do you have to ruin me?" I held the phone, saying nothing. A thought suddenly struck me. In my past life, when Claudia destroyed me, did anyone ever ask her, "Do you have to ruin her?" Probably not. Because in that life, everyone was on Claudia's side. "I'm just protecting myself," I said. Claudia was crying. Not the kind of coaxing, whiny cry from before. This was real crying, her voice rough and grating, as if scraping against sandpaper. "Vera, I was wrong. Please, I'm begging you, just take down the post, okay? I won't ever dare to do it again." I didn't soften. But I didn't kick her while she was down either. I said something very calmly. I'll take down the post, but first, you make a public apology. Public? Yeah. Post an apology on the forum, admit you started the rumor. Claudia cried even harder. Then how am I supposed to stay at school after this? I shot back, and what about me? If I hadn't done anything, but got called a mistress and accused of tampering with grades, how would I have stayed at school? Claudia was speechless. I hung up the phone. 40 minutes later, an apology post appeared on the forum. The poster, Claudia. The content was only 3 lines. I, Claudia, admit to slandering Vera and hereby apologize. No explanation, no excuses, even the words I'm sorry felt perfunctory. I read it, took a screenshot, and saved it. Then I posted a new thread, apology received, but the legal process will not be dropped. That afternoon, Claudia received a school-wide reprimand and a demerit. The police also launched an investigation into the online defamation case. I thought this would make Claudia back off. But I was wrong. That evening, I ran into Claudia in the hallway of the teaching building. It wasn't a coincidence. She was waiting for me. There was no one else in the hallway, just the 2 of us. The sky outside the window had already darkened, and the hallway lights were motion-activated. They would turn off when it was quiet. Claudia stood at the end of the hallway, her back against the window, moonlight streaming in from behind her, hiding her face in the shadows. I stopped in my tracks. There were probably about 10 steps between us. The hallway light went out, then came back on because of my footsteps. It went out, then came back on because she took a step forward. Vera. Her voice was very soft as if she were saying something unimportant. Do you know what I hate most about you? I didn't answer. What I hate most is that look of yours, like no matter how much you're trampled on, you'll always get back up. Her voice began to tremble, but not from crying, it was something more intense. You know, when we were kids, we lived in the same neighborhood. Your family was on the 6th floor, mine on the 3rd. After your dad passed away, everyone thought you were finished. That you'd have to drop out and go to work. My pupils constricted. Childhood. The same neighborhood. A memory suddenly hit me. In the neighborhood where I grew up, there was indeed a family named Lynn living on the 3rd floor. They had a daughter, 1 year younger than me. But in my previous life, I didn't meet Claudia until college. She had never mentioned this before. You know what? Claudia let out a short laugh. You're not done. You got into the best high school in the city, and then you got into this university. And me? My dad's business failed, my mom cries at home every day, and in high school, I couldn't even afford extracurricular books. What do you think I borrowed money from you for every time? Was it really because I was short on cash? No. I wanted you to know, you're still that poor girl living on the 6th floor, and you can't help anyone. I listened quietly to her words. A certain place in my heart suddenly turned cold. Not out of fear, but because I finally understood one thing, Claudia's hatred for me didn't start in college. It had begun long, long before that. Those loans, that concern, that surface-level friendship, they were all just disguises for her resentment. And the most ironic part was that I didn't even remember Claudia. I didn't remember the Lynn family who lived on the 3rd floor when I was a child, or the girl who was a year younger than me. Because back then, I was too busy surviving, too busy coping with the pain of losing my father, too busy helping my grandmother with the housework, too busy racking up one excellent grade after another on my report cards. I was too busy to notice that someone was watching me, and hating me. So what happened to Grandma was your doing, I said. It wasn't a question, but a statement. Claudia was silent for 2 seconds. The day you changed the light bulb, I was downstairs at your place, she said, her voice flat. I saw you standing on a ladder, stretching on tiptoes to reach the socket. After you came down, I had someone go up and loosen it. My nails dug into my palms. It's not that I want to throw her to her death, Claudia said. I just want you to know that you can't protect anyone. You can't even protect your grandmother. The hallway light went out. In the darkness, I could hear my own heartbeat, heavy, slow. Then I heard Claudia's voice coming through the dark, carrying a strange, almost confessional emotion. Vera, you know, sometimes I dream about you. I dream of you standing on the podium, and I'm clapping down below. Everyone praises you for being smart, hardworking, and sensible. And me? I'm down there clapping until my hands are red, and no one even looks at me. I didn't say a word. Claudia took another step forward, and the light came on. I saw her face, no delicate makeup, no perfect smile. Her eyes were red, her mascara smudged, leaving 2 dark streaks beneath them. I just want to live a little better than you, she said. Why do you always manage to turn things around? I looked at her face, and a storm of emotions churned inside me. Hatred. Anger. Sympathy. Disgust. These feelings tangled together, turning into an indescribable silence. Finally, I said, if you want to live better than me, then go live your own life well. Not by destroying mine. I turned and walked away. As I stepped out of the teaching building, the night wind hit me, and I realized I was trembling. Not from fear, but from anger. That anger was so thick, so intense, that I wanted to turn back and hurl every single thing Claudia had done right in her face. But I didn't. Because anger wouldn't help me. What I needed was evidence. I opened my phone and sent a message to Briar, help me look into someone. Who? Claudia. Check all her social media accounts, chat logs, and transaction records. Especially the past month, see if she's transferred money to any unfamiliar account. Briar replied with an okay, then added, are you okay? I stared at those 4 words, stunned for a moment. I thought it over and replied with one word, not bad. It wasn't the truth. But I didn't want to tell the truth. Briar was faster than I expected. The next afternoon, I received a file. It wasn't something Briar had looked into herself, she said she'd asked someone from her family's company for help. That kind of help sounded simple, but I knew it meant Briar had tapped into the connections of the Gu family's legal and information security teams. The contents of the file were very detailed. Claudia's call logs, transfer records, and chat screenshots from the past month were all organized and sorted by time. I flipped through page by page, and on the 14th page, I found what I was looking for. On October 20th, Claudia transferred 2,000 yuan to an account with the note change the light bulb. On October 21st, she had 3 phone calls with the same account holder, totaling 27 minutes. In the chat history, Claudia said, just loosen the bulb in her building's hallway, don't do anything else. The other person replied, are you sure? What if someone gets killed from a fall? Claudia's response was, that's none of your business. I stared at the 4 words, none of your business, for a long time. Not no one will die from a fall, not the risk is low, but none of your business. This meant Claudia knew the risk, but she didn't care, because all she needed was to shift the blame onto the person carrying out the act. I organized all the evidence, packed it up, and sent it to the police. At the same time, I sent a copy to the school. But I didn't wait for the police or the school to handle the matter. I was waiting for something else. 3 days later, the school announced its second disciplinary decision. Claudia was given a serious warning and placed on probation for cyber defamation and attempted unauthorized access to someone else's account. On the same day, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. I answered, and on the other end was the voice of a middle-aged woman. Vera, I'm Claudia's mother. I'd like to talk to you. I was silent for 2 seconds, then said one word, okay. We agreed to meet at the cafe near the school. When I arrived, Claudia's mother was already sitting inside. She wore a dark coat, her hair casually tied back, and the makeup on her face couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. In front of her sat a cold Americano, with beads of condensation clinging to the cup. Seeing me, she stood up, her lips moving slightly as she said, have a seat. I sat down without ordering anything. Claudia's mother didn't bother with small talk. She said directly, after Claudia's father passed away, she changed. I didn't respond. She was 15 when her dad died, just starting her first year of high school. Before that, our family was doing okay, he ran a factory. But then the factory went under, we were drowning in debt, and he was gone. Her voice was flat as if she were reading from a script. Claudia changed after that. She barely talked to me, and the friends she made got stranger and stranger. I couldn't control her. I just couldn't. She paused, lowering her gaze to the cup of cold coffee in front of her. I know she's done a lot of wrong things. But Vera, she's only 21 this year. Could you give her a chance? After hearing these words, I remained silent for a long time. I thought back to my past life, when I knelt in the hospital hallway begging for money over the phone, and Claudia didn't answer. When my grandmother lay paralyzed in bed, Claudia was posting pictures of new handbags on social media. When I was hit by a car and died, she stood by the roadside laughing. I remembered the words she said in the hallway, "I just want you to know, you can't protect anyone." "Ma'am," I began, my voice very soft, "your daughter almost killed my grandmother." Claudia's mother's eyes reddened. "I gave her many chances," I said. "Every time, she said she knew she was wrong. Every time, she didn't change." I stood up. "The law will give her a chance. But I won't." I turned and walked away. As I stepped out of the cafe, the sunlight was beautiful. The late autumn sun wasn't harsh, falling warm on my shoulders. I stood by the roadside for a moment, taking a few deep breaths, letting the bitterness in my chest slowly fade away. My phone buzzed. Briar sent a message, "Done with your business? Still up for getting your nails done?" The corner of my mouth twitched. I typed, "I'll do it. Be there in half an hour. Then I'll make a new color, and you get to decide." "Okay." I put my phone in my pocket and walked toward the school. The sunlight stretched my shadow long across the sidewalk, which was covered in sycamore leaves. I didn't look back. Claudia's case was decided faster than I had expected. Intentional infliction of injury, combined with the previous charges of defamation and attempted cyber intrusion, resulted in cumulative punishment. Sentenced to 1 year of imprisonment, suspended for 1 year and 6 months. Compensation for my grandmother's medical expenses and emotional damages totals 50,000 yuan. The school expelled Claudia. The day I received the verdict, I flipped through the calendar. January 15, 2025. Exactly 90 days had passed since my rebirth. 1 day longer than I had lived in my previous life. I sat on my dormitory bed, holding the verdict in my hands, staring at it for a long time. Snow was falling outside the window, the first snowfall of the year. The flakes were small and fine, melting as soon as they touched the ground. Briar poked her head out from the top bunk, glanced at the papers in my hand, said nothing, and retreated back. About a minute later, she tossed down a pack of tissues. I froze, only then realizing I had been crying at some point. Not sobbing, just tears falling on their own, quietly and endlessly. I didn't wipe them away. I just sat there, letting them flow for a while. I wasn't crying for Claudia. I was crying for the version of myself from my past life. The one who knelt in a hallway begging for money over the phone. The one who was torn to shreds in online forums. The one who, in the last second of his life, saw Claudia standing by the roadside, smiling. "It's all over," I whispered softly. From the top bunk came Briar's lazy voice, "If it's over, hurry up and grab my new hand cream. It's in the second drawer." I laughed through my tears, stood up, and went to get the hand cream. A week later, I received a letter. The envelope read to Vera, with no signature, but I recognized the handwriting, it was Claudia's. The script was neat and orderly, unlike any I had seen from her in my previous life. I tore open the envelope. Inside was just a single sheet of paper. Vera, while in the detention center, I came across an old photo from my childhood. My dad took it, by the flower bed in front of our apartment complex, where I was playing with a few other kids. You were in the corner of the photo, crouched on the ground, as if picking something up. I stared at it for a long time before I recognized you. I don't remember what you picked up that day. Maybe it was a marble, maybe a coin. But for some reason, I remember the look on your face. So serious, so intense, as if picking up that thing was the most important thing in the world. I always hated that expression of yours. Now I realize, it wasn't you I hated, it was myself. I've never picked up anything with that kind of seriousness. I'm sorry. Those 3 words are too light, but they're all I have. Claudia. I finished reading the letter, folded it, and put it in the drawer. I didn't reply. In spring, Grandma's leg fully recovered. I rented a small apartment near the school, 2 bedrooms and a living room, facing south. When Grandma moved in, she brought a box of homemade pickles and a large bag of sweet potatoes. As I helped her unpack, I found a cloth bundle at the very bottom of the box, wrapped around an old photograph. It was my elementary school graduation photo. Among the girls squatting in the front row, one was circled in red ink. It took me a while to recognize her, Claudia. I froze. Grandma, where did you find this photo? You left it at my place last time you moved. Grandma took the photo, squinted at it, and asked, who drew that red circle? It wasn't you, was it? No. I turned the photo over. On the back, in a childish scrawl, was a line of writing, Vera, when I grow up, I'll definitely live a better life than you. I stared at that line for a long time, and suddenly remembered the sentence Claudia had written in her letter, I've always hated that expression of yours. So it had started from that early age. I put the photo back in the drawer, placing it together with the letter. I walked over to the window and pushed it open. The early autumn wind rushed in, carrying the scent of the osmanthus trees downstairs. My phone buzzed. Briar had sent a message, her tone as lazy as ever, my nails are messed up again. How much for a fix? I leaned against the windowsill, my typing hand pausing for a moment. Someone outside was calling my name, it was the auntie from the milk tea shop downstairs, waving at me, signaling that the new drink she'd made was ready, free for me to try. I froze for a second, then smiled. I looked down to reply to Briar's message, then looked up again to wave back at the auntie in thanks. The sunlight fell perfectly on my shoulders, not scorching, just warm and cozy. I thought back to the words I'd spoken on the day I was reborn, this life, I would stand tall and live on my own terms. And now, I had become the person I most wanted to be,